If we are ready to put down their arms, come to the round table and discuss it in succession, I'm ready. I will support them.
Yes, there is some truth to this headline, but it is heavily twisted to grab your attention. So let us dive straight into the real story of what is happening right now in 2026 regarding Sheikh Ahmad Gumi and Nnamdi Kanu, without any of the misleading fluff. To understand why a prominent northern Islamic cleric is suddenly talking about the leader of the indigenous peoples of Biafra, we have to go back to the massive event that shook the nation recently. After a very long and complicated legal journey that lasted for years, Nnamdi Kanu was officially convicted by the Federal High Court in Abuja. The presiding judge, Justice James Omotosho, found him guilty of serious security charges and sentenced him to life in prison. This was a monumental moment because for a long time, many people wondered how the trial would end. During the final stages of the trial, Nnamdi Kanu actually refused to enter a defense or cross-examine witnesses further, choosing instead to let the court make its decision based on the prosecution's evidence. The court concluded that his public broadcasts and instructions had directly fueled unrest and attacks on security personnel in the southeast region. Once the life sentence was handed down, Kanu was moved to the Sokoto Correctional Center, which is far away from his usual base, sending shock waves through his supporters and political leaders all across the country. Almost immediately after this historic sentencing, leaders from the southeast, including lawmakers and various political figures, began calling for a peaceful political solution. They openly appealed to President Bola Tinubu to use his constitutional powers to grant Kanu a presidential pardon, hoping that his release would calm the tension and restore complete peace and business activities to the region. This is exactly where the story gets incredibly interesting and where the viral headline you saw comes into play. Just a few days after the life sentence was announced, Sheikh Ahmad Gumi, a very well-known and often controversial Islamic cleric from Kaduna State, appeared as a guest on Channels Television for a morning interview. Sheikh Gumi is famous for his strong belief that the government should negotiate with armed groups in the north rather than using military force. During this live broadcast, the topic of Nnamdi Kanu was brought up, and Sheikh Gumi made a statement that caught everybody by surprise. He did not say he supports the division of Nigeria, and he definitely did not support the goals or the actions of the group. Instead, he offered a conditional olive branch. Gumi stated clearly that if Nnamdi Kanu would show genuine remorse for his past actions and publicly call for peace, he, Sheikh Gumi, would personally step forward and be at the forefront of the campaign, begging the government to grant Kanu amnesty. Gumi explained that his position is not about supporting any specific group's agenda, but rather about finding lasting peace for Nigeria as a whole. He pointed out that Kanu was imprisoned for inciting conflict against soldiers in the southeast. But if Kanu is willing to change his ways and become a strong advocate for peace, then forgiveness should be on the table. To back up his argument, Sheikh Gumi reached into Nigerian history and reminded everyone of past leaders who chose peace over continuous punishment. He mentioned how former President Shehu Shagari granted a historic pardon to Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu after the Civil War, allowing him to return to Nigeria as a free man. He also brought up the late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who famously offered an amnesty program to armed groups in the Niger Delta. These groups had also been involved in heavy conflicts with the government, but the amnesty program brought a significant level of peace and stability to the oil-producing region. Gumi argued that Nigeria has a history of using forgiveness to heal deep national wounds, and the exact same approach could work for Nnamdi Kanu right now if he is willing to repent. By the way, as we unpack this complex political drama, if you are enjoying this clear and straightforward breakdown of the news, please take a quick second to like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Your support helps us keep bringing you the verified facts without the misleading noise. So hit that subscribe button and let us continue with the story. Sheikh Gumi did not stop at just offering to campaign for Kanu. He used the opportunity to heavily criticize the government's constant reliance on military action to solve the country's security problems. He firmly believes that the Nigerian army, just like many conventional armies around the world, is not designed to fight unconventional conflict in the forests and rural areas. He gave examples of how even the mighty military of the United States struggled in places like Afghanistan, and how other powerful nations face endless challenges in their own local conflicts. According to Gumi, when you are dealing with armed groups that hide within civilian populations, sending in troops with heavy weapons often leads to more chaos and does not solve the root cause of the problem. He asked a very thought-provoking question during the interview. If there are people who are ready to lay down their arms and talk, why does the government always prefer to use force? He mentioned that he has been trying to get the government to talk to armed headsmen in the north, noting that whenever these groups are called for peace talks, they often show up even though they come with their weapons out of fear. Gumi believes that the same open door should be available to groups in the east and others, provided they are truly ready to embrace peace and national unity. This situation naturally leads us into a related discussion about the broader state of security in Nigeria as we navigate through the early months of 2026. The truth is, the country is facing massive challenges on multiple fronts. In the north, there have been terrifying incidents of mass abductions, with school children and everyday citizens being taken from their communities in places like Kwara, Niger, and Kebbi states. People are living in genuine fear, and this is exactly why Sheikh Gumi has been so loud about trying a different approach. However, the military is absolutely not backing down. In their recent 2026 New Year broadcast, the armed forces issued a stern riot act to all armed groups and agitators across the entire country. The military made it absolutely clear that they are removing the kid gloves and will deal decisively with anyone trying to destabilize the nation. So, you have a situation where the government is tightening its grip and showing maximum force, while voices like Sheikh Gumi are pleading for a step back and a move towards the negotiating table. It's a massive clash of ideas on how to keep the country safe. In the midst of all this tension, there is a massive amount of fake news circulating on social media that we need to clear up immediately. Because emotions are so high regarding Nnamdi Kanu's life sentence, many bad actors are creating false stories to get views and cause public anger. For example, in February 2026, a wild rumor started spreading rapidly online that Nnamdi Kanu was offered 100 billion naira and his total freedom if he would just meet with President Tinubu. Let me be very clear. Independent fact-checkers have completely debunked this story. There is absolutely no evidence that such an offer was ever made or that the president traveled to the Sokoto detention facility to beg Kanu. It is completely fabricated. Similarly, there have been fake videos manipulated to make it look like Sheikh Gumi is telling the government to give armed groups whatever they want and include them in the national budget. Again, this is a manipulated video, taking an old interview and altering the audio to make him sound worse than he actually is. There were even rumors in early 2026 claiming that Sheikh Gumi had fled Nigeria to hide in a foreign country because his life was in danger. All of these stories are entirely false. This is exactly why it is so important to rely on verified news and not just read sensational headlines that are designed to trick you into believing a false reality. The irony of this entire situation is something that many Nigerians are talking about right now on the streets and online. On one hand, you have Nnamdi Kanu, who has been put in bars for life because of his fiery broadcasts and the actions of his supporters in the East. On the other, you have Sheikh Gumi, a man who openly visits the forest camps of armed groups to speak with them, yet he walks completely free in society. Many critics have pointed out this sharp contrast, wondering how the justice system balances these two very different realities. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, it is this very free man, Sheikh Gumi, who is extending a hand to the imprisoned Kanu. It shows just how complicated Nigerian politics can be, where the lines between enemies, mediators, and allies are constantly shifting like sand. Sheikh Gumi's offer to campaign for Kanu's release is a perfect example of this complexity. He is essentially saying that the only way forward for a united Nigeria is to stop focusing on endless punishment and start focusing on rehabilitation and forgiveness, no matter which part of the country the problem is coming from. As we dive deeper into the historical context that Sheikh Gumi referenced, it is vital to understand why the amnesty model is so appealing to leaders who want to stop endless cycles of conflict. When the government implemented the Niger Delta Amnesty Program many years ago, it was a massive gamble. The region was heavily militarized and the national economy was suffering because of constant attacks on infrastructure. The government realized that arresting a few leaders or fighting in the creeks was not stopping the thousands of young men who felt left out of the national wealth. By offering a clean slate, monthly stipends and vocational training, the government essentially bought peace. It wasn't a perfect system and it cost the country a lot of money, but it worked to stabilize the economy. Gumi is looking at the current situation with agitation in the southeast and the rural conflicts in the north through this exact same lens. He is arguing that putting Nnamdi Kanu in a prison cell for the rest of his life might feel like a victory for the justice system today, but it does not necessarily stop the underlying anger of his millions of followers. In fact, some analysts feared that Kanu's life imprisonment could turn him into a permanent symbol of defiance, making the situation even harder to resolve in the future. Gumi's proposition is that if Kanu repents, the government can defuse that symbol and turn a potential problem into an advocate for national unity. This perspective is what makes Gumi's intervention so fascinating, because he is asking the government to trade a hard-fought court victory for a chance at long-term psychological peace. Furthermore, we must talk about how the upcoming political calculations are influencing these events behind the scenes. Even though the next general elections are not until 2027, the year 2026 is already proving to be incredibly consequential. Politicians are making major moves, forming new alliances and trying to secure the backing of their regions. Leaders in the southeast know that they desperately need a peaceful environment for their states to thrive politically and economically. The continuous unrest, the frequent stay-at-home orders, and the general atmosphere of fear have heavily damaged local businesses and chased away investments in the region. By pushing for a political solution for Nnamdi Kanu, these leaders are not just trying to save one man, they are trying to save their local economy from total collapse. When a prominent northern figure like Sheikh Gumi publicly agrees that a political solution is the right way forward, it gives those southeast leaders a strange but very powerful ally. It shows the whole nation that the desire for a peaceful, non-military solution is not just a regional demand, but an idea that has strong supporters across different parts of the country. The big question now, as we look at the political landscape of 2026, is whether Nnamdi Kanu will actually take this advice. Will a man who has dedicated years of his life to a very specific and unyielding agitation suddenly show public remorse? Will he publicly call for peace and accept the terms that leaders like Sheikh Gumi are laying out for him? For now, Kanu remains in the Sokoto facility and his legal team is likely looking at all their remaining options after the crushing defeat at the trial court. The Southeast political leaders are still working quietly, hoping that the president will exercise his power of mercy. But President Tinubu has a very difficult decision to make. Granting a pardon might bring peace to the east, but it could also make the government look weak in the eyes of the military, who have sacrificed a lot during these conflicts. Furthermore, if the government pardons Kanu, it opens the door for other armed groups in the north and the south to demand the exact same treatment for their own captured leaders. It is a delicate balancing act of national security and national healing that the president must handle with extreme care. Ultimately, this story is about much more than just a sensational YouTube headline designed to get your clicks. It is about the very soul of the country and how it chooses to deal with its deepest divisions and historical pains. Sheikh Gumi has put his cards firmly on the table, offering a bridge across the regional and religious divides that so often keep Nigerians apart. Whether that bridge will be crossed by Nnamdi Kanu or whether it will be completely ignored by the federal government is a major story that is still unfolding right before our eyes. What is absolutely certain is that the events of late 2025 and early 2026 have set the stage for a very important period in our history, and the decisions made in the coming months will shape the future of the nation for a very long time. We will be right here to keep you updated on every verified detail as it happens, ensuring you get the full picture without any of the misleading noise. The factual information and events discussed in this broadcast were sourced directly from verified news outlets operating into 2026, including Vanguard News detailing Sheikh Gumi's exact quotes about pushing for Kanu's amnesty. This Day Live's comprehensive coverage of Nnamdi Kanu's life imprisonment sentence, Channels Television's morning brief interview with Sheikh Gumi, and Africa Check's recent debunking of the fake news regarding the 100 billion naira offer and manipulated videos.